Hey there, everyone, and welcome back to Utility Sports. Today, we're going to be coming at you with a fun one here, my breakdown on the big trio here in the NFL draft at that cornerback position. I think it's pretty clear that there is a top three and then a little bit of a step back after that third guy. Today, I'm going to be giving you my big board at this cornerback position, who I think is number one out of these three players. Of course, these top three guys are Jaycee Horn out of South Carolina, Caleb Farley out of Virginia Tech, and also Patrick Surtain out of the University of Alabama. And I think these three guys all present something a little bit different that they're going to bring to the NFL. And I think they're all built in a little bit of a different way. So we're going to break down, first of all, what I see in them that makes me think highly of these three players. I do have a first-round grade on all of these players. I just want to preface that. So when I'm talking here, it might be sounding like I'm a little harsh on some of these players. I'm just nitpicking a little bit. When you're at the top of the draft like this, you have to look at some of the potential weaknesses, some things that aren't going to translate well into the NFL, and then pick from there on who you think is going to be the best. I think all three of these guys are going to be quality NFL cornerbacks. I'm just going through and picking my favorite of the three as we go through this. So let's start here with Jaycee Horn. He's a guy who's been really jumping up boards a lot. He's a 6-foot cornerback out of South Carolina. He weighed in 205 pounds at his pro day. He has a 77.25-inch wingspan there. And he also ran an official 4.37 second 40 time. So he ran very, very well. I wasn't expecting that out of Jaycee Horn, if I'm going to be honest with you guys. So now what are some of the positives that I see in Jaycee Horn's game? He's very physical. He can win off the line of scrimmage. I really like what he presents from a physical standpoint as a cornerback. He's willing to do the dirty work. He's willing to get into wide receivers. He's going to be a little bit of a nuisance for wide receivers to face on Sundays, in my opinion. There's a famous clip of him going up against and jawing with Jerry Jeudy 2 years ago. And I think Jaycee Horn is a player that isn't afraid of any challenge. He's not going to back down from it. And that's something you want in a cornerback. A big thing about cornerbacks is outside of just the physical talent you need to have to play the position, there is a mental side of it as well of, hey, I'm going to be willing to go out, fight, challenge every single second of the matchup. And I think Jaycee Horn fits into that very well. Also, another part of his game that I do really like is what he presents as an outside cornerback. He uses the outside sideline as a boundary very, very well in his coverage. He likes to position himself in between the quarterback and the wide receiver in a way where he's playing off the wide receiver's back hip, and he keeps the wide receiver pinned between him and the sideline. That helps him a lot on the deep ball, basically edging the wide receiver out of play. That has been Jaycee Horn's bread and butter at South Carolina. He was very, very effective in doing that. And I think that is something that will translate well to the NFL when he is able to stay on the back hip of the wide receiver and keep him towards the outside plane of the field. I think that is Jaycee Horn's biggest strength, honestly, as a cornerback. Another strong point of his, I think at tackling, he's the best of the three, actually, in my opinion. I think that he breaks down well, tackles low. He's going to be a very efficient and effective tackler at the NFL level, in my opinion. He's going to be able to come in, make plays in the backfield. He uses his eyes well to diagnose run plays, to diagnose screens. I think he's going to be impactful when he's in zone situations because of his ability to use his eyes to impact other areas of the field, especially when he's not in zone coverage over the top, say a cover 3 defense. If he's in some cover 2s, some cover 4s where he is playing the underneath coverage, I think he's going to be efficient in those areas as well. Not necessarily as much in coverage, but as a tackler, I think his definite strength is man-to-man coverage on the outside. But I think when he is in zone coverage, he can use his eyes fairly well and will be an all-around solid cornerback at all points in coverage. And then one other positive I really want to mention about him, I talked about his mentality a little bit earlier. He has a motor and a fight to him that I think is really well diagnosed in this picture here that I chose. He's going to be aggressive at the end of catches. He's going to be someone who works to knock the ball out. He's going to try and force fumbles. He uses his hands very well after the catch and during the catch to try and break up passes. I think that is another strong point of Jaycee Horn that I think is a little bit stronger than guys like Patrick Surtain and also Caleb Farley have in this class, just because of his ability to get his hands into the picture, make plays on the ball. Now, he doesn't get a lot of interceptions doing this, but he does break up a lot of passes. I think that is going to be something that translates to the NFL as well, probably to a lesser extent just with the quality of competition. Players are going to be finishing catches a little bit more often. But I really want to point out that I think he's going to be a guy that works hard in the NFL. I think he's going to be an efficient cornerback one on Sundays very quickly into his career. And I think he's going to be a very good player. I could see him going anywhere from about pick 12, maybe pick 11 even, all the way back until maybe even 10 at Dallas, honestly, all the way back until maybe pick 22, 23 with the New York Jets there. I think Jaycee Horn kind of fits into that pick 10 through 23 range for where we'll see him go during the draft. And I think that he has a lot of good positives to bring. Now, some of the negatives I have on Jaycee Horn, I mentioned how physical he is. I think that can be a good thing, but I also have my concerns about him being a little too grabby, a little too physical. I think he might rely a little bit too much on his physicality and his athleticism to a point where I don't know if I necessarily trust his footwork and hips as much as I do the other two players in this class at the cornerback position that are at the top in Caleb Farley and Patrick Surtain. I think that he struggles across the middle of the field more than Farley and Surtain do. And I think that I do have real concerns about him. If he gets beat off the line of scrimmage, what is his ability to get back into the play without being grabby, without drawing penalties? Especially, we know in the NFL how much penalties can kill an NFL team. I think Jaycee Horn's going to be a little bit more liable to a penalty than guys like Patrick Surtain and Caleb Farley in the NFL. And I think he could have a little bit of a hard transition time as well, especially on inward breaking routes, something like slants, ins. If we get a couple double moves, I think that could be problematic for Jaycee Horn as well. I think that's going to be my biggest concern for him is he's a little grabby and he doesn't work across the middle of the field quite as well, in my opinion, as the other two guys. But all in all, I still think Jaycee Horn, a very good cornerback, still have a first-round grade on him. Caleb Farley here now measures in at 6'1", weighs in at 197 pounds, and he had an unofficial 40 time. Now, remember, he did not actually measure in or participate in Virginia Tech's Pro Day because of the injury concerns with his back. He was not active during that, but there was a video with an unofficial 4.28 second 40-yard dash. Now, that is interesting. That is the top of the three guys, and I think that goes to show what some of his athletic potential could be. I think he is the most athletic player out of these three cornerbacks, and I think that there is a lot of upside for him in that area. So what are some of the positives I see in Caleb Farley? Well, his ball skills are through the roof. He's got the best ball skills in the NFL draft at the cornerback position, in my opinion, and I think that lends itself to some really good versatility. He uses his eyes well. He's very, very fluid in the hips back in transition. He can change his direction well, can flip his hips going from right to left. I think he deals with post routes very well. I think he's going to deal with some of those in-breaking routes much better than a guy like Jaycee Horn, like I was just talking about. And I also think it brings some versatility for what position he could play at the next level. It's very likely I could see him playing over-the-top safety very often as well, just with what he provides at that position. Now, one big thing with Farley, for me, is he's newer to the position as well. His athleticism, he's got good eyes, good ball skills. He's going to be able to read and diagnose plays well, and he goes and makes those plays too. He's very athletic, and he gets up and he challenges the wide receiver, almost like a wide receiver himself with the way he goes after footballs aggressively, and I think that's going to lend itself very well as an off-ball cornerback in the NFL. Now, my questions for him are, is he going to be good in man-to-man coverage? I think that there's a lot of concerns there. I think he's going to be a little bit slower on some of the route recognition than the other guys like Caleb Farley or like Jaycee Horn and Patrick Surtain, rather. And I think that is going to be a big question for Caleb Farley. But all in all, I love what his potential brings. I love the versatility he could provide. I think he could play out of the slot a little bit too. I think he could play over the top at safety. And I think his ball skills are through the roof as an off-ball cornerback. I think he's going to be a perfect fit for a zone system where he's able to play off the wide receiver, come down and break down on routes, and give himself some time to diagnose, recognize plays, recognize routes, and then use his athleticism to make those plays rather than being in one-to-one man-to-man coverage and then having to react in the instant. Instead, I think he's better off being able to use his eyes to read plays and then break down on plays. My other questions for him, tackling. I think he's the worst tackler of the three top cornerbacks. Part of it is he's newer to the position. We didn't get to see him this past year. You know, maybe he's improved in a lot of these areas. It's very possible Caleb Farley could be a much better prospect than what we have tape on. But also, there are the injury concerns that are going to pull him down a little bit. All in all, I think I think Caleb Farley is a great prospect. I think that he's a guy who we could see go as early as pick 8, to be honest with you, and possibly fall all the way down to pick 32. I think that he has a very wide range. I think those injury concerns are real. I think it could scare some teams away from taking him in round 1 partially. I would be surprised if he made it past the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's why I have 32 as his absolute floor. I think he'd be a perfect fit there in Tampa Bay, especially with them having time to kind of bring him up to speed. If he's not ready to go right away, that is completely fine. They're in Tampa. They have all 22 of their starters back. But for Farley, the upside there, I think, is too great to not really take a long look at him, especially once you get to pick 8 where the Carolina Panthers are picking, pick 10 the Dallas Cowboys. I think Farley's not as good of a fit there as Horn or Surtain, honestly, because of their man-to-man system, what they're going to put next to Trayvon Diggs. But I still think Farley, a very good cornerback, could fit in a lot of different areas there. Tackling is a concern, but it's very possible he's growing in a lot of ways since we've last seen him play college football. And the third cornerback here, Patrick Surtain. Now, the biggest strength with him here is those measurements. He measures in at 6'2". That is well above prototypical size. 208 pounds. Again, a very good frame. A very good 78.5-inch wingspan. And he ran a 4.46 40 time. Some questions about him I had before was, what is he going to run in the combine? What is he going to run at his pro day? I was a little nervous he wasn't going to run well. But a 4.46 40 time is definitely something that is going to be not only solid, but good for the other positives that he brings to the table. He's going to be great in man-to-man coverage very quickly in his career. He's got very good hips, very good footwork out on the outside. And I think he's much better than Jaycee Horn at covering a wide variety of routes. Now, I think he's a little bit more liable to get beat outside. Unlike Jaycee Horn, I think Jaycee Horn is definitely much safer around the outside of the field, but I think Surtain is much, much better on the inside of the field. I think he's a little bit more versatile in his ability to cover a wide variety of routes. I think he's got very good route recognition. He's someone who doesn't waste steps either when he's out in coverage. He's able to break on routes quickly. He has very good route recognition, like I said, but he's also very adept at getting himself involved in plays that he doesn't really have a part of being in. When he's in zone coverage, I think like Jaycee Horn, he's very efficient at breaking down on routes that are developing underneath of him. But I think his length and his size also presents a very good frame that's going to be impactful in zone coverage if a team decides to use him in that way. Obviously, when you're in the NFL, you're going to have to run some zone coverage, even if you're on a primarily man coverage team. And I think Surtain is probably best suited to do both at this point, both cover in man and zone. I think Farley has a little bit too much weakness in man, and I think Jaycee Horn's a little bit weaker in zone coverage than Surtain. And all in all, I think Patrick Surtain's just the better man-to-man coverage corner. And like I said earlier, his measurements and his physicality are going to be great. He's going to be good off the line of scrimmage. I think he's got very good hands at the point of attack there. Off the line of scrimmage, he's going to win frequently, I think. Now, some of my concerns are if he's set up in a press, bump and run coverage, he is going to be a little bit more liable with his slightly less athletic body to get beat over the top in those scenarios. I think Jaycee Horn, who does such a good job limiting outside throws, is better suited for bump and run coverage than Patrick Surtain because of those because of his ability and his speed and his athletic nature to cover over the top a little bit more often. Surtain might need a little bit more over the top help than Jaycee Horn, but at the same time, Surtain needs less help over the middle of the field. What are my negatives on him? His upside is very possible I could see him growing into a guy like Stephon Gilmore. So you're saying, well, how is his upside a question mark? It's also very possible he ends up like some of these other cornerbacks we've seen come out of Alabama, where they just don't necessarily figure it out. Maybe they've been benefited by some of the pass rush help there at Alabama, and they're just all in all in a better system. The physicality, I think, could really prove to be something where, hey, maybe Surtain was just physically better suited to play at the college level, and it doesn't really provide much of an advantage once you get to the NFL level as consistently. That would be a question for me. And also takeaways. He only had 4 interceptions in his 3 seasons as a starter for Alabama. I am concerned that he won't be a guy that takes away the ball with frequency, but at the same time, if you are getting a premier man-to-man cover corner, you're going to take that because he's going to be someone who can probably travel if you're looking at a team like Carolina here, I think, again, 8 makes a lot of sense. I think if I'm running Carolina, I would really look at Surtain at pick 8, honestly, because of what is in my division. You have to deal with Michael Thomas. You need someone who's going to be physical, can cover across the middle of the field, also work the outside part of the field. That's Patrick Surtain. You have to look at Mike Evans, who's a big physical frame. I think Surtain matches up with him better than a lot of other cornerbacks that we see coming through the pipelines in recent years. I think Surtain is going to be a good cornerback in the NFL still, despite some of my concerns. Now, here's my board. Caleb Farley is my number 1 cornerback because of what I think his upside could be in the NFL. I think he's going to be the best player in off-ball coverage, running in a zone defense. I think that he's going to be very, very productive when the ball's in the air. I think he's going to challenge wide receivers, and I think he's going to be able to win those challenges fairly often as well. I think he's going to be a takeaway machine. And I think all in all, his style is going to fit very well into a few different areas. I hope my New York Jets are able to land Caleb Farley at 23. That is the dream scenario for me, is that he falls a little bit because of injury concerns, and my Jets grab him at 23, complement what we've done on our defensive line, and grab a good cornerback here in the draft. Patrick Surtain, a very close second for me, right behind Caleb Farley. I think what he presents at cornerback is going to be very, very desirable for a lot of different NFL teams. I think he's going to be good off the line of scrimmage, and I think he's going to be very good in coverage, flips his hips well. I think that's one of the most important aspects of cornerback play, is someone who's able to not only move well, but react well with their hips and their footwork, and I think Patrick Surtain does bring that. And then Jaycee Horn, he's my 3rd cornerback. I think there's a little bit of a gap there between Surtain and Horn for me. I like Horn's chippy nature. I like what he's going to bring as an outside cornerback, limiting deep balls, limiting stuff over the top on the outside. But all in all, I think he doesn't really have the number 1 potential that Farley or Surtain have, in my opinion, just because I think he has so many flaws working across the middle of the field. And I say, if a coach teaches him, hey, let's be a little less grabby, you try and take away part of who he is and that physical nature at cornerback, maybe he just doesn't transition as well to the NFL as these other 2 guys. That's kind of the way I see it. I'd love to know what your order is for these 3 players in the NFL draft. Let me know in the comment section down below. Also, subscribe to Utility Sports if you are new. We love to have all your support, and we're excited for the NFL draft. It is less than 1 week away. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on our live stream we will be doing on draft night. Thanks again, guys, and we'll catch you in the very next video.